O God, our Heavenly Father, we thank you, Lord, for all that you've done in the life of our late Pastor Don. We were able to enjoy your grace through his life, therefore we thank you, God. When we look at him and when we think of the work that you've done through him and the ministry that he has done, Lord, we are able to believe every word spoken. We are able to believe every word that we read in your word of God. You have made him a living epistle for us, therefore we thank you, Jesus. Help us, Lord, to follow his footsteps so that we too could attain that state. Thank you once again for all the testimonies and for all the blessings you have showered upon us. Take charge of this meeting as we meditate on your word. In Jesus' name. A message sent by Pastor T.U. Thomas and all the saints of God in Madras. Pastor Don's life was greater than his message. His great humility convicted my great pride. His gracious sweetness convicted my great bitterness. His heavenly love convicted my hidden hatred. His tenderness convicted my hardness. His forgiving spirit convicted my unforgiving spirit. His transparency convicted my hypocrisy. His bright light convicted my utter darkness. Finally, his shining example conquered my shameful, ugly life. It is true, in one sense, his departure to glory is a great loss for us. But in a deep sense, heaven's gain is our gain also. For me to die is gain. Last Thursday afternoon, Pastor Don fully gained Christ, the greatest treasure of heaven. Indeed, it was a gain for heaven. It was a gain for Christ. It was a gain for the glorified saints and a gain for the holy angels. And therefore, it is a gain for us also. Let us never forget the faithfulness of God. When he took a Moses, he gave a Joshua. In Acts chapter 12, Apostle James was martyred. But in Acts 13, God gave both Apostle Paul and Barnabas. The best tribute that we can pay for our beloved Pastor Don is to follow his Christ-like example. As the good tidings reached the heavenly shore at 1:52 p.m. on last Thursday, 19th August, that one more shining stone for Zion safely arrived. Myriads of silver-winged angels might have joyfully burst into singing, O Zion, that bringest good tidings, get thee up into the high mountain. O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, that bringest good tidings, lift up thy voice with all thy strength. Lift it up, be not afraid. Lift it up, be not afraid. Say unto the cities of Judah, behold your God. Behold your God. Behold your God. Well done, thou good and faithful servant. Enter into the joy of the Lord. Pastor T.U. Thomas and all the servants of God in Madras. I would like to thank God for this precious moment that the Lord gave me. And I think I'm the least worthy to stand here and to say a few things about this great saint of God who has left us. And as we have heard from the dear ones, he has been a real father to every one of us. And at the same time, he has been very sharp in correcting whatever went wrong in our lives. And I really thank God for the fellowship I had with this dear saint of God. And when I hear the various testimonies, I'm able to see how much I'm still lacking in the character of Christ. And I pray that God will grant me grace to acquire all the beautiful character of Christ in my life. Praise be to God. Even as I was thinking as to what I should share, the Lord was always pointing me to one verse, which is quite a common one, which we read in Philippians chapter 1, verse 21.
For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain.
Praise be to God. So this verse helps us understand that death is not a loss for a saint of God, for a servant of God. Though we may in the flesh, we do feel the loss of this great saint. But when we look at it from God's point of view, it's a great gain. But for our lives to be a gain, or our death to be a gain, it all depends on how we live out this life. As for this saint of God, it lived out his life in such a way that his death is a great gain. I came across one young man who was selling some artwork, and he told me about the various pieces of art he was selling. That a piece of artwork will become more valuable once the artist dies. As long as the artist is alive, though people do appreciate his art, but the value will be only limited. But once that person dies, the work that he leaves behind becomes valuable, very expensive. And day by day, year by year, that value increases. So also, we have really enjoyed the life of this dear saint of God. But through his death, his life or his value has not diminished, but rather it has increased. And even as days to come, years to come, when we think of his life, his value is going to increase more and more. That's why here St. Paul says, for me to die is gain. Praise be to God. And for our lives to be a real blessing and for our death to be a gain, we have to follow the footsteps of our late Pastor John. As Pastor T.U. reminded me over the telephone, and he wanted me to let everyone know that we should all have the spirit of Pastor John. The way he manifested the life of Christ, that should be found in our lives. And I would like to once again remind everyone of that verse that we meditated last night in John the Gospel, chapter 12, verse 24.
Verily, verily, I say unto you, except a corn of wheat fall into the ground and die, it abideth alone. But if it die, it bringeth forth much fruit.
We saw this verse last night, and this verse explains to us how even our death will become very precious. We know that this verse speaks about the Lord Jesus Christ. This verse also speaks about every servant of God, one who has consecrated his life to serve God. And this life is also applicable to every child of God. So here we find that for a life to be a blessing, it has to fall to the ground and die. And that life is compared to a grain of wheat. And that grain of wheat, when it falls to the ground and dies, it's able to bring forth much fruit. One of the important things that is necessary for that grain of wheat to bring much fruit is the quality of that grain. It's according to the quality of the grain that grain could reproduce itself. As for Jesus Christ, we know that he was a corn of wheat which was full of life. That's why the Word of God says all the fullness of God was in Christ Jesus. As a result, when that corn of wheat fell to the ground and died, it was able to bring forth much fruit, or it was able to produce other grains of similar quality. The same thing applies to servants of God. If our life is to be a real blessing, and if we are to reproduce or produce many other servants of God, and if we are to produce other people of God through our lives, then it depends on the quality of our life, the quality of that grain. But God makes us a grain of such quality by giving us a calling. And in that calling, we see all things necessary to make us precious is found. The first thing we find in the calling that God gives us is the grace of God. That's why in Galatians 1st chapter verse 15, St. Paul says that God has called me by his grace. That grace makes us a precious corn of wheat. That grace makes us a corn of wheat with such quality that's found in Christ Jesus. That's the reason why we have to be careful concerning the grace that God has imparted to us. And as for Pastor Don, we know that God's grace was in him. In everything he did, we were able to see the grace of God. Even St. Paul says that when other apostles saw him, they perceived the grace that was found in him and in Barnabas. You can read for yourself. I think it's in Galatians chapter 2 verse 9. He says that other leaders or the other apostles like Peter, John and others perceived the grace that was found in Paul and Barnabas. Similarly, we can say that God's people, God's saints were able to see that special grace in Pastor John. And we too were able to witness that. And we were able to enjoy that grace in our lives. And this applies to every servant of God. If God has called us, then surely God has given us his grace. And that grace makes us a precious corn of wheat. In the Word of God, we also read that this grace is something like a salt. In Mark 9th chapter verse speaks about the power of God. When God calls us, he not only gives us the grace, he also fills our life with power. And in many of his messages, Pastor Don always emphasized how that God fills his servants with his power. So the salt not only speaks about grace, the salt also speaks about the power of God. That's why Mark 9 chapter verse 49 we read that we must have that salt in our lives. And he compares that salt to fire. Here it speaks about, first it speaks about the power of the Holy Ghost. Secondly, that fire there speaks about the cleansing work of the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit not only gives us power and grace, but he also does a work of cleansing as we go on serving God. We can win many souls and we can do great things for the Lord. But if our life is not built up or cleansed or made ready for the coming of the Lord, then all our work will be in vain. And that's what we read in the testimony of Pastor Don. He wanted something great in his life, something higher in his life. And the fire there also speaks about the sufferings through which God takes us through. Sufferings also are like salt in our life, which gives taste to our life. Without sufferings, our life, our ministry will be one without much taste. And further, when we read in Leviticus 2:13, we also see the salt there speaks about the covenant that we make with God. Whether it be our personal life or the ministry, it's not something we do without any commitment. Ministry means it's a covenant with God. That's why the Old Testament, the name given to their ministry was Covenant of Peace. It's also called Covenant of Life. So a ministry is a covenant. It's not a ministry for 1 or 2 days, but it's a ministry that has to be done throughout our lifetime and to be continued in eternity. So a ministry is like a covenant. That's why that salt also speaks about covenant, the covenant we make with God. And Pastor Don had been faithful in the covenant that he had made with God till the very end. And through his life, we are once again reminded that we should renew the covenant that we have made with God. And finally, we see salt also speaks about the peace of God, as we read in Mark chapter 9, verse 50.
Salt is good, but if the salt has lost its saltness, wherewith will ye season it? Have salt in yourselves, and have peace one with another.
Praise be to God. So here, having saltiness also speaks about keeping the peace of God, peace with one another, peace with God, peace within ourselves, peace with everyone in this world. All these things are part of the calling that God has given to us. And these things makes us precious in the sight of God. Though we speak about many blessings that comes from God, but the peace of God is a valuable blessing which we have to preserve. So in these days, as we thank God for the great work, the good work that the Lord has done in our late Pastor Don, let us also once again renew these experiences in our life as we serve God and as we follow Christ in our lives. so that we too can have a victorious end like our late pastor. So these experiences makes us precious in the sight of the Lord. Next we read, for that grain of wheat to become fruitful, it has to fall to the ground and die. The ground here speaks about various things. We can compare this ground first to the will of God. We have to die into the will of God. In Isaiah 53 verse 10 we read, it pleased the Father to bruise his Son Jesus Christ. So that was the will of God. And he yielded to that will of God, and he died in that will of God. Secondly, this ground also speaks about the love of God. We have to fall into the ground of the love of God and die. As we read in 2 Corinthians 5th chapter, verses 14 and 15, how St. Paul says that Christ died for us, and it was counted as if we all died. And now it is our turn to lay down our lives for him. Praise be to God. Next we read that this ground also speaks about the service of God. And the service of God can be divided into three parts. First, our service is to the whole world. As we saw in the life of Pastor Don, his ministry was not for any particular place alone, but it was for the entire world. The Lord has called us to serve the whole world. As St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 9th chapter, verses 19 to 22, he says, I have been made all things to all men, so that I may save a few. And secondly, service to the church of God. In Philippians 2:17 he says, he is willing to be poured out as a drink offering upon the faith of God's people. And thirdly, service to the co-servants of God. This was another beautiful aspect we heard just now from all the servants of God. How Pastor Don not only served the souls in the church, but he was also serving the servants of God with whom he came in contact with. In Philippians 2nd chapter, verses 27 to 30, we read how St. Paul was so much burdened about the servants of God who were under his charge. So unless one is willing to fall and die, he or she cannot be fruitful. But we are able to see this good example in our late Pastor Don, how he willingly offered himself to die for the sake of the whole world, for the sake of the church, and for the sake of the servants of God. So now the torch has been given into our hands so that we may bear the torch and press forward both in our lives and in our ministry. Shall we all thank God for the beautiful life that God gave, God showed through our late Pastor Don. Shall we all thank God for that? Amen. Hallelujah. Even as we thank God, let us rededicate our lives. As we have been hearing these testimonies, God will have spoken to us as to in which area of our life, which area of our ministry we are not up to the mark, or we have not done our best, or where we have been careless. Shall we all surrender ourselves and ask the Lord to renew us so that we too can shine as Pastor Don did, that our lives may be a blessing to others as Pastor Don's life was. Shall we all rededicate our lives? The Lord is here. Fill us with a new grace, new power. And the Lord is able to do that which He has done in the life of our late pastor. The Lord wants to fill us once again. Shall we all rededicate our life? Hallelujah. 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 Amen. Hallelujah. 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 Praise be God. Praise be God. Praise be God. Hallelujah. 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 Amen. Amen. Even this morning, if there is anyone who feels that you are far from God, you are far from the grace of God, the Lord is speaking to you through the life of Pastor Don. And He is strengthening you once again. He is encouraging you once again to draw closer, because the Lord wants you and you are also important in His sight. Shall we all praise God for that? Hallelujah. For all the beautiful testimonies the Lord raised up this morning. Shall we all praise God? Amen. And as we press forward in our lives, for God to give us that same spirit of Christ which was found in our late Pastor Don. Shall we all praise God? If the Lord delays His coming, there's still some more time for us to serve God and to pour out our lives, both servants of God and the people of God. Shall we all make a real dedication in God's presence and praise God for God's grace to be upon us? And we may have the chance of meeting Jesus face to face without tasting death, if that takes place before our death. And we have that hope. And it is God is able to make us ready for that day. Shall we all praise God? We thank you for granting us the grace to enjoy the ministry that He did, and Lord, the beautiful things that You did through Him upon. Even Lord, as we are going to lay His remains into the ground, we know that You are going to raise up many more such saints of God, because You are a living God and You are not dead. You are still alive. Therefore, we thank You, God. And You are able to guide us till the end of our lives too. We commit ourselves. We commit every servant of God. We commit the whole church into Your gracious hands, O Father. Prepare us for that glorious day. In Jesus' name we ask all this. Now may the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, the love of God, and the sweet fellowship of the Holy Spirit rest and abide with us until Jesus returns in glory.
Amen.